I do have a good radio face. Good bar face, too. In the late 1920s, the infant son of Charles and Ann Lindbergh was kidnapped and held for ransom in what was described at the time as the crime of the century. Even though the little child was never found, the German immigrant was sentenced to death by Judge Ezekiel Devitt on the flimsiest of evidence. He went to his death, never revealing the fact, and who can blame him, that the child was still alive. Having studied the baby picture, it is easy enough for us to understand and to appreciate why the Lindberghs refused to pay the $38 ransom which they had deemed as unreasonable. Countless hours of investigation by then FBI Director J. Wesley Anderson failed to turn up any trace of this child until this year, when 62 years of unpaid bills came to the American National Bank from a diaper service in Great Bend, Indiana. Our evidence has since proven conclusively that the Lindbergh baby lived the life of an imposter, the troubled and confused saga of a man of many faces, of many personalities, the life of Glenn Olson, the greatest imposter of them all. Life was not easy for young Glenn. Adopted by an unsuspecting family in Great Bend in the 20s, after he had been found on their doorstep, baby Olson, known by his adoptive parents as B.O., had to win his way into their hearts by disguising himself as a girl. This is him or her in the baby dress with the Foster brothers. And it is the earliest evidence we have of young Glenn's latent tendencies to become a female impersonator. The Lindbergh child was given the best of educations before graduating at the bottom of his class from Boys Town, Nebraska. He was 32 years old at the time. His natural father's love for the air found expression in young Olson's genetic framework. Shortly after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, he ran out to enlist. The Army said no. The Navy rejected him. The Marines, they just laughed. He served in the WACs for 6 weeks before receiving a medical discharge for having wet dreams while on guard duty. He became a cadet and a pilot, and later, and we have the evidence here, was the most decorated flyer in the Japanese Imperial Air Force. Tokyo Ole. Yes, even in the Japanese Air Force, he was the shortest recruit. He was a spy, a counter-spy, and yes, in the end, finally, even a kamikaze pilot. The only one to fly 32 missions, as a matter of fact. U.S. Army intelligence became suspicious of Olson when he gained 14 pounds in the Bataan Death March. But the end of the World War had come all too soon for Olson, after he had accidentally dropped the first Japanese atomic bomb on Hiroshima. Peacetime was to become a troubled time for the great imposter. He became at first, perhaps as a sense of relief, a playboy, Porfirio Olson. Yes, Porfirio Olson, womanizer, bon vivant, man about town, and part-time furniture salesman. He got his start selling love seats to young virgins at the local furniture store, and that is where he met the woman who was to become his partner in crime. Just as Bonnie was to Clyde, so was Mary Kay to Ole. Like a band of gypsies, they moved across the nation, bilking the innocent kidnapping children, fooling all of the people all of the time. He even posed briefly as a salesman and won the Oscar Holman Lookalike contest 3 years in a row. Here he is with his latest invention, acoustical pantyhose for flatulent females. Olson was uncanny in his deceits, winning sales contest after sales contest. He even posed for a brief period as a paper boy, a delivery boy for the St. Paul Dispatch and Pioneer Press, and won the Carrier of the Month contest. The accolades and distinctions began to pour in banking school, where young Olson graduated magna cum brown nose. It was Olson who went to the dean and said, do you want to get screwed? And he said, sure. And he says, cash my check. There was no stopping him now. The evil genius became compelled by an insatiable quest for money and power. But a personality change came over young Olson here. He saw himself in the movie. He was Citizen Kane, and momentarily changed his name to Orson Olson. But then the old ugly traits began to come back within his soul. On a carpet-selling trip to Chicago, he befriended a young publisher, Hugh Hefner. The transvestite tendencies became unbearable. Bill Olson took command of the new personality and signed up as a 6-month hitch as a Playboy bunny. Drugs, sex, pornography, all were becoming a part of daily life to young Oldie. He was the only bunny short enough to become the April 1966 foldout for Reader's Digest magazine. Few knew of Olson's strange, twisted other life. He was still looked upon with awe and respect in the business community. Here he is, for instance, with the 1978 winner of the Glenn Olson Lookalike contest. Here he is in a recent photograph posing with Paul Giel, as Paul Giel, trying to get a coach for the University of Minnesota football team. And here is Olson as he defrauded the entire nation as chief negotiator for the Greyhound bus strike. During the peace demonstration at Sperry Rand just this week, Olson was the only demonstrator to get a piece. Here is Olson in South Dakota, enlisting in what he thought was pussy comitatus. It was his plan to get a woman's auxiliary organization of Gordon Call Girls. His perversions were endless. He and his so-called bride were into llamas as late as the 1982 period. It was during this troubled time that Olson became overwhelmed with the notion that something was definitely wrong with his personality, something the bank had been telling him paycheck after paycheck. Olson wanted to become a woman. Borrowing some clothes from his wife Mary Kay and some under things from Councilman Robert Sylvester, Olson decided to come out of the closet. He became a waitress and once again excelled. As Nadine Dumke, shown here, said, Olson had the biggest set of tips in the business. By night a waitress and hat check girl, by day Lester Cudahy, architect of the uninteresting. He personally designed the American National Bank building. A structure, he said, was inspired by the late Jack Geller. Arrested in 1983 for window peeping, Lester Cudahy was forced momentarily to leave the city. He joined the Ice Capades as Dick Butt, the figure skater, in a chorus line of a production number of transvestites known as the Gay Blades. Now aging rapidly, Olson returned to St. Paul, this time convincing the children at the Ben Franklin store that he was the owner. There was a serious side to Glenn, a desire to serve his community as he had seen on television in recent days. The next slide, please. He wanted to become a judge. Olson's passion for the feminine role, however, was insatiable. He wanted to become a pro, a hooker, a pro hooker. He went as far as to take lessons from Tommy Wisecoff. Is that Tommy Wisecoff?
Yep. Who's the other guy?
That didn't work. Neither did that joke. Glenn Olson didn't work. The edge was going off his ability to impersonate successful people. His attempt to convince the world that he was Howard Hughes and was flying the Spruce Goose to Long Beach, California, failed miserably, and that Hughes had died 2 years earlier. And when he forged the Hitler diaries earlier in 1983, Olson was found wanting in his disguise as the late military ruler of the Third Reich. He could no longer afford the uniforms for his deceit. The young executives at the bank began making demands on Glenn. Next slide. Demands he could not fulfill. He decided to retire at age 62, decided to give up the life of confusion and deceit, of constantly seeking to find his true identity, and to do what he does best. With malice toward none, charity toward all, as long as it was on the expense account, this living legend, this so-called imposter, whom we all, in spite of what we know about him now, love as deeply and sincerely as any human can love another. This man who taught us so much about mirth and selflessness and the joy of living will always be remembered for that one lesson in life that carried him so valiantly through these many years. You can fool all of the people, all of the time. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Glenn Olson.